Hey guys, Xlice here. 1.4 Endfield brings us our 4th Nature Operator, Arcane. She's our first character that has 2 unique skill sets, Int and Will Mode. Will Mode joins Ardelia, Gilberta, and Fluorite as a support with Grouping CC, Nature and Cryosus, and Extra Arts Infliction. Int Mode is our first taste of a Nature DPS. In this complete and detailed guide, I'll explain everything you need to know about Arcane. With full transparency here, my editors and I have been super busy lately, so apologies if this guide is a bit later than usual and with a bit less polish. Don't worry though, it will still have everything you would need to build and play Arcane properly. This includes how to play her in combat, a summary of everything useful in her kit, best builds, teammates, useful potentials, a gameplay showcase demo, and a final review. As always, disclaimer on screen since this is a creator server, and with that out of the way, let's get into it. So, Arcane has those 2 modes, Int and Will. The mode is determined entirely by which stat is higher. So more Int equals Int. This means that her gear pieces will determine her mode. Int mode will give her 24% Arts Amp during Ultimate, and Will mode will give her ult up to 12.8% Nature and Cryosus. She will need 640 Will to fully cap this value, which is pretty easy to get. Both modes are pretty good for what they do, so it just depends on how you want to play her. Here's what she does in Int mode. Battle Skill. Deals big damage and applies 1 stack of Nature Infliction. It's 66% stronger than Will mode for the multiplier. QTE activates when 1 stack of Nature Infliction or 2 stacks of any other infliction are on an enemy. Imprisons the target, slowing all actions, and applies Nature and Cryosus to the target and all nearby enemies. While an enemy is imprisoned, you can see their actions are heavily slowed, and after a brief delay, the enemy will take extra damage. Or if you use Arcane's Battle Skill on an imprisoned enemy, it will consume that imprisonment, deal extra damage, restore 30 SP, and apply an extra instance of Nature and Cryosus. The cooldown for this is shorter here at 12 seconds. Because of this synergy, Int mode will always want a QTE first into Battle Skill for extra damage and debuffs, where you set up the QTE infliction requirements naturally through teammates. Now you can also use Arcane Battle Skill into her QTE into another Arcane Battle Skill for a self-sustained DPS rotation, especially useful for overworld trash mob clearing. Ultimate applies Force Corrosion and has 2 casts. It's a starter one called Gloom Purger Array, and a second one called Gloom Purge Arcana. Finisher will be available after 2 final strikes. The corrosion that Arcane applies, either from her ult or naturally through Art's reaction, lasts 10 seconds longer for 25 seconds total, and the Red Shred is 1.1 times more effective, which is pretty juicy to buff your entire team's damage. In this mode, Arcane's general rotation will always be to lead with her starter ult, then team combo into her QTE plus Battle Skill for maximum damage. When all buffs and debuffs are set up, use Finisher ult for a maximum Arcane nuke. Her starter ult is the easiest way to apply a 25-second long corrosion debuff, and we want this debuff active as long as possible to benefit the entire team's damage. Specific rotations will depend heavily on team comps, which are pretty versatile for her, so just remember to lead with ult and use Battle Skill after she procs QTE. Now here's what she does in Will mode. So in Battle Skill, it deals a bit less damage, applies 1 stack of Nature Infliction, and pulls enemies in just like Gilberta's skill. QTE activates when 1 stack of any Arts Infliction is applied. It will imprison the enemy and apply Nature and Cryosus in the same way as Int mode, but in Will mode, it will also apply 1 more Arts Infliction stack of the same type to the main target and all nearby enemies. This basically means her QTE will spread the main enemy's Arts Infliction to everyone else. Her QTE also gains a small grouping effect, just like her Battle Skill, and the Nature and Cryosus scale up to twice as strong based off of her Will. You'll need 640 Will for maximum value. The cooldown is longer here at 18 seconds, so this is mostly just to set up debuffs. But because of the easier activation requirement, Will mode is pretty flexible on QTE activation. Arcane can either force it herself with a Battle Skill plus QTE or 2 Nature Infliction stacks, or you can just use it on top of a general team rotation for whatever comp that you're running. Ult in this mode has the same 2 casts, but instead of applying corrosion, it applies another Arts Infliction stack of the same type applied to all enemies in that AoE. So, Will mode will have 2 same element Arts Infliction application, just like Fluorite. In this mode, Arcane's general rotation will be on full support duty, using QTE whenever possible. Battle Skill can either be completely ignored to save SP, or used to stack up more Nature Infliction. Ult will be used whenever you want to apply 1 more Arts Infliction stack. Remember to use her ult's finisher cast since it deals massive amount of damage even as a support. So overall, I really like her versatility. She can either go DPS mode with Int or Gilberta style with Will mode, providing pretty solid flexibility to existing comps. For talent priority, she needs Battle Skill, QTE, and ult. QTE and ult will be first priority since they are always used in both modes. If you go DPS int mode, then battle skill will be a fat amount of her damage, so make sure to level it up. If you're playing her on field, then basic attack will also be okay. QTE has all the sus values, and ult has her nukes. General recommendations are on screen. Now let's take a look at our build for both modes. In int mode, we're going to aim for the updated hot work set pieces. Since we lead immediately with corrosion application, this set is a free 50% nature damage, perfect for DPS mode. We're going to go heat damage body and gloves, all skill damage on kit, with int primary everywhere. One of our kits can be swapped with a main attribute link slab for highest DPS. Now, in order to make these, you will need the new Pyrolite components to make the new gloves and kit, but you can temporarily use these older pieces without too much stat loss. For Will mode, aim for the updated Eternal Sheer Knight set pieces. She'll be constantly applying sus for the team-wide damage dealt increase. Go with ult gain body and gloves, and then secondary attribute on kit, with Will primary stat everywhere. Secondary attribute will massively scale her will, as well as allowing you to easily hit 640. With fully artificed gear and max trust, you can swap out one kit for more ult gain and still hit 616 will. Now, unfortunately, every single one of these pieces does require the new 1.4 Pyrolite, so in the meantime, you can just run standard ult gain pieces with will and int. For weapons, she has two realistic options, the signature Solemn Phalanx and the Battle Pass Junction Point. Signature runs int, ult game, and detonate, whereas Battle Pass runs int, ult game, and efficacy. Both of them do have int and ult gain, so their total stat is basically the same. The only difference is the damage number in their passive stats. In terms of strength scaling, this is what you can expect. In int mode, the signature is a little bit stronger than the battle pass, and in will mode, it's actually pretty decent. Overall, not bad if you're running the battle pass. Now here's an example build and stat goals to reach. She'll be using her signature weapon with a 0, 6, and 3 essence and max artifice gear in both modes. Keep in mind that if we did have a 6 main stat essence, her int would be at least 100 higher. So in int mode, she has 680 int or 812 with 663, and then 362 will, 5.2k attack, and plus 46% ultimate gain efficiency. In will mode, she will have 326 intellect or 426-ish, 765 will, 4.2k attack, and plus 89% ultimate gain efficiency. Now for the essence, all three lines are pretty important. Int for damage, ult gain for uptime, and passive for team buffs. So aim for 442 as a starting point. Next up, potentials. So, P1, QTE is improved. Both modes gain a 1.3 times damage multiplier increase. The int mode will restore 10 additional SP, which is from 30 to 40, and will mode sus values are increased by 6%. The base is at 8% at 640 will, so this will bump it up to 14%. P2 is stats, and then P3 is the corrosion talent is improved. It's now 5 seconds longer, from 25 to 30 seconds, and it has a 1.2 times increase in res reduction. P4 is ult cost reduction, and then P5 is ult improvements. In int mode, the arts amp is increased by 16% to 40% total, and the finisher ult gains a 1.3 times damage multiplier increase. In will mode, the sus effects are increased by 7% up to 19.8% at 640 will. And then for both modes, after finisher ult is cast, if the QTE is on cooldown, it gains an instant 30% cooldown reduction. Overall, her potentials are pretty well divided. P1 and P5 will give the most notable increases, with P1 being a clear investment threshold. P3's corrosion bonuses are also pretty solid, but this one primarily benefits DPS mode a lot more because support mode doesn't apply corrosion naturally. Int mode has a forced corrosion from ult. Now that being said, if you do end up going P3+, you're probably playing her most often in DPS mode, so you will get the most bonuses from this. And then of course, P5 will aim to give you a massive boost to her ultimate damage and also speed up her rotation uptime with the QTE cooldown decrease. Now onto teams. So Arcane is insanely flexible, just like Gilberta, and can act as a flexed fourth slot for almost all current team types. Her supportive will mode will be the most likely setup for her, so here's how I build her team. We're gonna have an Arts DPS, plus Arcane, plus one Arts Inflictor, plus one Flex Sustain, Buffer, or Support. The Arts DPS includes Levitate for Heat, Last Strike or Yvonne for Cryo, Fang Yi for Electric. The corresponding Arts Inflictor will be Akekuri or Camille for Heat, Tangtang or Xiahi for Cryo, and Perlica for Electric. And then our Flex Sustain Buffer support can be Ardelia, the upcoming Lino, Gilberta, or anyone else corresponding to the particular team that you're running. So here's an example for each type. Lava Akekuri, Arcane Ardelia, this is for Heat. Yvonne Tangtang, Arcane Gilberta for Cryo. And then Fang Yi Perlica, Arcane Arknight for Electrify. Keep in mind that these teams that I mentioned are not fixed, they're just examples that do really well by adding Arcane. Now for DPS Arcane, she also has a pretty flexible support lineup. So here's how I build her team. We have Arcane DPS core, then one Arts Inflictor, and then a double flex slot. The Arts Inflictor is very similar to the previous supportive mode and can be Akekuri or Camille for heat, Tangtang or Xiahi for cryo, and then Perlica for electric. Our double flex also opens up a lot of options. The upcoming Lino again, Ardelia Gilberta standard, Wolfguard, or any second Arts Inflictor, part of the list that I previously mentioned. Now you can also build an extremely F2P friendly lineup that only uses Arcane's battle skill, and every other teammate just waits for QTE or ult. An example of this is on screen is Arcane, Perlica, Xiahi, and Akekuri. Alright, so here's a demo of the DPS and support Arcane in action. For DPS, I will run the super simple F2P friendly Arcane lineup with Perlica, Xiahi, and Akekuri. Level 90 Rodan is our test subject like usual, pause for builds used for the teammates. Arcane's build will be the same as what's shown in the build section. So gameplay rotation for Arcane is extremely straightforward. We just battle skill on her, then QTE because it procs it, and then battle skill again about every 12 seconds when her QTE is up. Perlica's QTE is just for free electrification. Akekuri is there for the link buff from ultimate, and Xiahi is there for amp from her ult as well. This team does take longer time than classic examples to clear, but considering how inexpensive this team is, I think Arcane's damage is quite good. And almost every teammate can be upgraded here, so this is pretty much bare minimum. In phase 2, when we stack buffs for Arcane's enhanced battle skill plus ult, we do get about a 400,000 combo between the two abilities for a super nice nuke.
The team's on par with the Yinglongs. Impressive.
Now for a support Arcane demonstration. Pause for build layouts again if needed. This is now probably the strongest cryo team we have, and it's extremely easy to execute with or without ults. The only downside is that the team does consist of 4 6-star limited operators, so it's not exactly cheap. Alright, so first phase is going to be a non-ultimate rotation. We start off with Arcane Battle Skill into Arcane QTE, which is an instant 2 Nature Infliction stacks, and also use Tangtang's QTE. Then Yvonne will consume those 2 stacks with her Battle Skill, which triggers Gilberta's QTE and Yvonne's QTE. Wait a little bit for our cooldowns and repeat one more time until phase 2. Now phase 2 is a full 1 cycle nuke with all abilities. Gonna lead again with Arcane skill into QTE, into Tangtang QTE. Then we Arcane ult plus Gilberta ult to add 2 more Nature Infliction stacks for 4 total. Gilberta QTE, Yvonne skill, and then Yvonne QTE. Then we Yvonne ult, then we set up a time stop. So we do Tangtang's enhanced skill first to set up those whirlpools. Then we do Arcane's finisher ult before it expires. Then we delay Tangtang's ult to time stop the boss. Then we finish with Yvonne's uninterrupted ult for a clean kill.
Now that was a satisfying fight.
Alright, so pretty juicy. Now for a final review, and is she worth pulling for? So just from my playtesting, it's kind of crazy how versatile she is. She's basically another Gilberta to add to your roster, and having both of them means you can best in slot support for a lot of teams and you don't have to pick and choose, because Gilberta can be one side and then Arcane the other. Now DPS Arcane is also a super comfortable option for budget players who don't have a well-developed account yet. And of course, if you do have a well-developed account, DPS Arcane can still go pretty crazy. I would say that the #1 reason to pull for her is if you don't have Gilberta, but you want someone like Gilberta. Arcane will be the closest to that. And the #2 reason to pull is to round out best in slot supports for basically all teams by having both Gilberta and Arcane. Now, in my opinion, the #1 reason not to pull for Arcane is if the teams that you have invested in are already pretty complete in terms of investment, because then Arcane would only be a relative side grade or a small marginal upgrade. Now, the exception to this would be the ultra expensive Yvonne team comp that we showcase for support Arcane, because that comp does get significantly stronger and significantly easier to play. And that's gonna wrap it up for this complete and detailed guide on Arcane. Thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to like and sub for more Enfield content, and we'll see you guys next time. Take care.